Political elections are just as much a popularity contest as they are anything else. How can a candidate have a chance at winning an election if half of the voting body doesn't know who they are? The answer is simple: they can't. It doesn't matter if a presidential candidate has perfect ideas that would 100% unite the nation if no one knows who they are. Because if no one knows who they are, then it would be impossible for them to be elected. The job of every presidential candidate is to get their name into every household in America because that is how votes are won. The amount of money spent on a candidate's campaign, combined with the amount of media exposure a candidate gets, are and have always been the most important factors when determining our presidents. There are lots of things to look at when studying the effects of campaign finances on determining the winners of presidential elections. But first and foremost, let's check out, since 1980, how many candidates who raised more money than any other candidate won the election. From 1980 to now, 11 presidential elections have occurred, 9 of them being won by the candidate that raised the most money. If this doesn't show a direct correlation between candidates spending and winning, I don't know what does. Even in the legislative branch, candidates that spend the most money on their campaign are far more likely to win. Let's take a look at this graphic. This graphic shows, most importantly, the total number of races in the House and Senate from 2000 to 2010 and the percent where the top spender won their race. In the House, from 2000 to 2010, 93% of the time, the candidate that spent the most amount of money won that election. In the Senate, 83% of the time. Staggering numbers. Staggering numbers that show direct correlation between candidates spending and winning. Now that we've established that spending leads to success for presidential candidates and other political candidates, let's take a dive and learn about what those candidates spend their money on. As the media grows more and more influential into U.S. citizens' everyday lives, political advertising only expands. According to Forbes, in the 2019 to 2020 election cycle, total political advertising spending reached $8.5 billion across TV, radio, and digital media. This was 30% higher than the $6.7 billion projected the year before this election occurred, and 108% more spending than in 2017 to 2018, which was a record at the time. Democrats also raised far more money than Republicans in the 2020 election, which supports my assertion that money raised has a direct correlation to winners. Believe it or not, political advertising is still primarily spent on TV ads. Forbes says that from 2016 to 2020, 80% of all political advertising went to broadcast and cable TV, which is a statistic that has stayed pretty constant since the late 1980s. Advertising wasn't always the way that presidents campaigned, though. In the beginning of the USA, political parties didn't operate like powerhouse machines, and candidates thought it was undignified to campaign. Starting in the 1830s, cheap newspapers known as the penny press aligned themselves with political parties, and a growing network of roads, canals, and railroads began to carry political information nationwide. This is the first method of political advertising. Some people that don't agree with my assertion, which is that campaign finances and advertising have led to a direct correlation with who wins elections, might argue that the 2016 presidential election winner, Donald Trump, didn't raise as much money as Hillary Clinton. In 2016, Hillary Clinton raised about 770 million versus Trump's 433. So how could my assertion still stand strong? For one, this is an outlier election, one of two elections since 1980 where the candidate that didn't raise as much money as his or her opponent won. And secondly, I have a reason for that. Since the day that Trump announced his running for presidency to the day he was officially out of office, no one's name was spoken about more than Donald Trump's. He didn't have to pay a dime for the media to give him press, simply because he was the most polarizing figure in the world at the time. His name was always in the news for one reason or another. Maybe he would say something questionable about immigration. Maybe some dirt about him getting with a prostitute would get kicked up, or some other dirt would get brought up about him. But in the end, all that the media was doing was giving him free advertising. It was literally impossible to turn on a news station without Trump's name being mentioned. And I don't even have to prove that because all of you were alive during that time. So while Trump might not have raised as much money as Hillary Clinton, he had by far more media coverage than anyone in the world, which is why he won the 2016 election. After analyzing history and learning a bit about election trends, it is safe to say that the amount of money spent on a candidate's campaign, combined with the amount of media exposure a candidate gets, are and have always been the most important factors when determining our presidents. I'm Christian Johnson. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.